how we grow into creating generational wealth for people of color. This is not about how much money are you making at your job. That is wages. We're talking about creating wealth, and that is about creating assets, homes, and other assets that you can pass on to your children, to people that your descendants. And that's what we have to think about in this conversation of generational wealth. When you say from a moment of, talk about from a place of aspiration, I want us all to think about how we look at our young people and talk to them about financial literacy. Talk to them about what a balance sheet looks like. Talk to them about what interest rates are. Talk to them about the difference between the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve and why they need to care. Because the other families are talking to their kids about interest rates. They're talking to their kids about creating bank accounts. And we need to do the same thing if we want to create and close this generational gap, this wealth gap that unfortunately continues to increase. So I think that's where I would want people to focus on and start thinking about. Because yes, we can pass all the laws and all the regulations that we want. And I want to thank Chairman Horsford for doing so much of this work with the Black Economic Agenda that they introduced legislation. But a lot of the work is on us. A lot of the work is making sure that we talk to our families and our friends about creating generational wealth and how we do that.
John, I want to continue the conversation that we were having in the conference room in the back, and just to fill people in. You mentioned knowing what a spreadsheet and all of that is. Would you say spreadsheet or financial? So let's talk about financial literacy. And you said that the vice president mentioned it the other night. Those aren't just words; it needs to be done. You talked about starting savings accounts for young people, especially young Black people, and that we need to be financially literate. Can you fill our audience in and pick up on what we were talking about? Because I think it's really important when it comes to this conversation we're having.
Thank you, Don. Agree with you 100%. Mr. Chairman, thanks for having the vision to do this. We're sitting in a moment in history. History does not feel historic when you're sitting in it. It just feels like another day. But that does not mean the moment is not historic. This is the third Reconstruction right now. Started in 2020. First Reconstruction was after slavery. The second one was the Civil Rights Movement. Third one was 2020, kicked off with George Floyd's murder. With regard to us, it'll last to 2030 if we're lucky. This moment's not coming back again. Financial literacy is the civil rights issue of this generation. Period. Black capitalists matter. Period. This is not a new conversation now. After the Civil War, by the way, slavery was about money. Am I talking to myself? Slavery was about money. Free labor. Slaves were worth more than railroads and everything else in this country combined in 1860. The wealthiest city, Don, in America in 1840 was Natchez, Mississippi. In the world, rooted in slavery. 1865, Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. After the Civil War, Dr. Lincoln called for the Freedmen's Bank to create a bank chartered to, quote, teach free slaves about money. The minute he called for that, he was assassinated. The next month, it was 40 acres, a mule, a bank, assassination. 100 years later, here comes Dr. King. Civil rights, war effort, he calls for wealth, but really redistribution of wealth, murder before his first march in Washington. We're not dumb and we're not stupid. It's what we don't know that we don't know that's killing us, but we think we know. I was last night, Don, I was going to dinner with the guy who runs the Raven, Sashi Brown, and I was recommending my hotel restaurant. He said, no, let's go to Brahms, which is on 8th Street, I believe, in Northeast, a Black-owned restaurant. So we go to this restaurant, I meet the owner behind the bar, I hear his story. He bought this building in 2020, when during the pandemic, all of the property values were down. Yes, he's making an income. He got receipts from that night. Yes, he has some revenue, but none of that matters. That building he's in is worth 7 figures. The credit score down in Anacostia today is 620. The credit score in, I think it's called Tinleytown, is 775. 15 minutes apart. All across this country, you can go across this country, Black people have the lowest credit score in America. That means that half of Black people have a credit score below 620, financial literacy, below 620. There's nothing wrong with this. We're brilliant. But we're talking about getting that bag, getting that cash, getting that money, getting that dollar. You build wealth in your sleep. You make money during the day. It's what I call making a living. So when you wake up in the morning, half of us are locked out of the free enterprise system because our credit score is 580, 550, 600. What do we see in our neighborhoods that have a credit score, Don? A check casher, next to a payday loan lender, next to a rent-to-own store, next to a title lender, next to a liquor store, next to a pawn shop. Can I get an amen? And a church down the street trying to make you feel a little bit better once a week, that's your neighborhood therapist. Because we are afraid to go see a psychologist, and if you're Black in America don't think you're crazy, you crazy. So what the problem is that's a 500 credit score neighborhood. You want to change America beyond what the chairman can do, what Congress can do? We move credit scores 100 points, which we can do ourselves. You move credit scores 100 points neighborhood by neighborhood. You listen to me now, you stabilize this country. You never had a riot in a 700 credit score neighborhood in America's history. 700 credit score neighborhoods go shop. And I don't care whether you're Black or white or red or blue. When you got some more green, you got freedom. This battle has changed. Well, hopefully later on we get into the demographics we talked about backstage. But this financial literacy thing, this is the new battleground. Because when you know better, you do better. Last thing I'll say, where have we succeeded? For somebody cynical out there saying, I don't know about this. Where have we succeeded? The arts, professional sports, faith, public policy. Rules are published, playing field is level. Can I get an amen? No one's ever taught us capitalism with free enterprise. And hopefully before this panel is over, you're going to see this nation now literally cannot do without us. It's never been this place, in this space, in this time, in the history of this country. We're no longer asking for charity. No longer asking for to do the right thing. Literally, economically, the country needs this. But we have got to be prepared with the tools to be able to go in and get that access, to get the number one way you build wealth in America, which is home ownership, small business ownership, entrepreneurship, etc. In Atlanta, Mayor Andre Dickens said, I want a bank account for every kid in kindergarten. People laughed at him. What are you talking about? In Keisha Lance Bottom. We now have an account for every kid, 7,000 kids in Atlanta public schools in kindergarten. Here's the drop to mic. Check this out. If you have a bank account in kindergarten, nothing else, no money in it, you're 50% more likely to go to college. If you have $50 in that account in kindergarten, you're 75% more likely to graduate from college. Because a kid is connecting education to aspiration. There's nothing wrong with us. Except we never got the business plan, we never got the memo.
And we never got a chance. Applause for generational wealth. I'm so glad that you mentioned housing, right? Because that's why I wanted to get Keitra Bailey to talk about that. It used to be what the number one thing that you had, your income or your economic feasibility was tied to what? Your home. That was the most expensive thing you owned, right? Lisa said, well, I need help, I can sell this house. People can't even buy houses, right? So what do we do?
Thank you so much for the question, and thank you so much to the CBCF and the chair for the opportunity for the National Fair Housing Alliance to be here. I'm feeling Michael's energy, and that's where I'm going this morning. Dr. King said, love without power is sentimental and anemic. He also said that power without love is reckless and abusive. And I say that because in these United States, there has never been time where they didn't need us. We are the free labor that built this joint. And we should never forget that. We came here against our will to provide free labor for a nation to build itself. And we can never, ever forget that. And why does that relate to policy? Because every single thing about our nation's public policies are built on that reality. When people came to these United States from Europe, they had this thing called the Head Rights Act. And they were actually given land grants for coming here to found the original 13 colonies. We want to jump to the Homestead Act, 1862. 20% of European white families who benefited from the Homestead Act grants can trace their families' wealth in 2024 to 1862. So when we talk about our value and this economy dependent on us, this whole thing was built on us from banking to insurance. We are the foundation. Our bodies, our physical bodies, were more valuable than the actual land itself. Read the 1619 Project. Our systems and our business practices, how we created efficiencies, come from the enslavement of African people. When we get to the Freedmen's Bank that y'all just talked about, it was a cash cow. Frederick Douglass said it. He said it was a cash cow for Black people in the white man's milk. The people who led the Freedmen's Bank, the trustees, gutted the money. We've never had a system of fairness in these United States. And Reverend Jackson always says that when the systems are fair and the rules are clear, we win. The reality is for us, that has never been the case, and housing has been the way we have cemented intergenerational opportunity for white people, and we have intentionally left out Black people. Our nation's public policies and practices based on housing, which was used to really create whiteness, as Gary talked about earlier. It was only in those 30s that we started to really define what whiteness is when we were creating suburban communities that we were excluding Black people from. Our federal government demanded discrimination.
Because you had to be a property owner.
Exactly, but not only that, demanded discrimination in the sense that there were these policies that created the Homeowners Loan Corporation. Redlining, we all know what redlining is. It's where our communities were excluded from economic opportunity. The Homeowners Loan Corporation systematized this system of grading neighborhoods based on characteristics. Those characteristics included race as a factor. So what has happened? This unfair association of race and risk. We talk about appraisal bias. We are losing out on $156 billion every year simply because of who lives in our homes. We have to whitewash our homes in order to try to achieve a fair and accurate appraisal. 156 billion. And when we take it back to those homeowner loan corporation and then the development of the Federal Housing Administration, which is done with taxpayer dollars, to be very clear, we are talking about our federal government subsidizing the suburbanization of these United States. And in the first years of the FHA insured mortgage program, 2% of federally backed mortgages went to Black people. We're talking about $120 billion of wealth that they had a head start with that we did not. In the VA program, in Mississippi, only 3 out of over 3,000 Veterans Administration loans went to Black people who served this nation with dignity. Because that second Reconstruction that we're talking about, we democratized these United States. We are the perfecters of this nation's democracy. We only have a democracy because our ancestors made it so. And so today, our responsibility is to advance solutions so that we can keep the democracy. Because what we know, and I'll wrap here, what we know is that our economy would be $16 trillion stronger, but for discrimination. $216 billion would be in the housing sector. Thousands of jobs, billions of dollars in local revenue is what we're talking about. We can actually grow this economy by $5 trillion over a 5-year period if we get rid of discrimination. Why? Because it distorts the market and it causes it to underperform. So it's in our economic interest, but to Michael's point earlier, we've got to have an economic and moral conversation. It's time for us to receive the dignity of our government's policies, because that's what has been extended to white Americans.
Erin, she mentioned something. She talked about changing the rules. How do we do that? And why? Is it because of the economic opportunities that people are so afraid of DEI, diversity, and inclusion? Would that help us economically? And how do we get people to not be so fearful of it and change the rules when it comes to it?
Ooh. I feel like we had 3 keynotes, so I'm trying to figure out how to stop this out before I get into this. Thank you so much for having me. I want to touch on something right before I answer your question, if you don't mind. When you started the conversation, you were talking about the wealth gap. And Attorney David elaborated on the 8 to the 12. I want to shed light on why we're having a catalytic effect right now when it comes to the wealth gap. It's called the technology industry. It's the world's largest wealth-producing industry, and it is funded by venture capitalists. The venture capital and private equity industry is a $62 trillion industry. And the largest investors are pension funds. Pension funds are made up of teachers, firefighters, police officers, and many more. Many careers that have people of color at the backbone of those industries. Sounds similar to something before 1865 when I'm about to break this down. So you have the pension funds right here. And then the money goes up to the VC industry, that's $52 trillion. That's controlled by 92% white male. And then that money goes all the way up to the white startups that make these tech companies. And very rarely does it make a full circle impact. So I wanted to explain that because the tech industry is what's making this wealth gap get even larger and larger at a very, very rapid rate. So I wanted to definitely give that clarification. And when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, to answer your question, no one should back away from the term of it. No one should back away from anything, because diversity is just good business. The US economy is made up of over 50% small businesses. And when you disrupt the access to capital to small businesses, you are in essence disrupting the whole entire US economy from a macro standpoint. So DEI needs to stay and not die, and everybody needs to just stay strong.
Marla, I'm going to get in, but there's something that I just want you to weigh in on. We get into it. Don't worry about that. She mentioned the tech industry. You were talking to me about AI and what it means for the future. How does that relate to economic equality for African Americans?
You want me to just deal with the AI, he's not going to get the future.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah.
So Van Jones told me recently that 99% of all white people don't know a thing about AI. And 99% of black people don't know a thing about AI. That's true. But AI is going to change your entire world in 3 to 5 years. Not 30 years. You went to the airport coming here. You went to a fast food restaurant. Track me here. 5 years ago, you went there, was 8, 10 people behind the counter. Somebody gave you a little attitude. What you want? She's gone. Now there's a little pad, and you punch in your order. They're gonna do something. There's 3 people behind the counter. Am I talking to myself? You go to a grocery store. Used to be an entire row of tellers. Then they tested an auto checkout on the right. Now you go, and it's all auto checkout, and there's 2 tellers. Half of all black jobs, 3 to 5 years, gone. Retail, manufacturing, service, anything that requires a high school education, gone. By the way, middle class white people do. Accountancy, half of lawyers, anything that can be automated. This is going to change the world. We went from horse and buggy, 1850, to automobiles. We're going to go in 6 years, not 60 years. From labor being most important to technology, which means you need a technology degree and a financial literacy degree. And you need it right now.
John, can I add something real quick?
Yes, don't.
It's quick,
Okay.
quick, because we are in the fastest industrial revolution ever. That's all.
That's it.
Can I just add this quick point? Our president and CEO, Lisa Rice, often says that AI is the modern day civil and human rights frontier. It's already here. It's not coming. It's already here. And we need to ensure our civil rights enforcements are strong and that we have responsible AI. And I just have to take this to housing. It's here in the sense that we have tenant screening applications and home rental processes that are screening out applicants based on the thing that John talked about, credit scores. And I want us to get into credit scoring because it's so important to talk about. It bakes in a history of discrimination. So if you've had a head start and you had a government that invests in your future, you have stronger financial footing because you've had home ownership opportunities. And you've used that opportunity to pass wealth over successive generations. If you didn't, what do you have? Debt. So what do credit scores do? Overweight debt, overweight your utilization of your credit. So of course we have 100% home ownership gap. I'm gonna flip that on us. I wanna flip that because after the Great Recession, we bailed out all these banks. And what did they do? They came back into our communities and they made it more difficult for Black people to get mortgages. How is that so? How is it that we're constantly undergirding because again, we came here to work for free, we're undergirding the economy, but we're not getting any of the economic benefits. So what we need to do is do exactly what Secretary Marshall Fudge did when she was the head of the House and Urban Development Division for President Biden and Vice President Harris. She changed the policies because wealth is created from policies in these United States. And what she did is she said, we are going to utilize something that has been the law for over 50 years, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act Special Purpose Credit Program provision. And what we are going to do is make it clear that if you create a special credit purpose program that is compliant with the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, we are going to say it does not violate the Fair Housing Act. And what did it do? It allowed us to do something that should have been done so long ago. We can now use positive rental payment data to help a person qualify for a house. Now, you would think that positively paying your rental payment would have been something that's part of credit scoring. It's not, because we have financial exclusion. Our communities aren't filled with banks. We have payday lenders. We have debt collectors. Where are the banks, even though there's a responsibility from the Community Reinvestment Act for them to extend credit in our communities? So that's why we have to have public policy leaders with the strength and brilliance and courage fighting for us. I think we're winning. I come to this conversation today as part of a victory movement. It feels tough. because we were running so fast. They're mad because they're trying to catch us. And what we need to continue to do is to continue to lead and not look back. The Bible tells us what happens to you when you look back.
All right.
Why are we wasting our time?
I want to talk about about corporate racial equity that's in the title of what you do. We talked about with seating for housing. We talked about what's happening with tech. The corporations hold the power, right? The money, the paycheck. So then help us. Help us make it make sense for us?
First, thank you, Don. Really an honor to be with you all here, and thank you, Chair Horsford, for this privilege. I'm going to start a little bit with my story about how I got here. A few years ago, I was a general counsel of a healthcare technology company based in Silicon Valley. I started my career as a corporate lawyer in mergers and acquisitions, capital markets work, and private equity work. In the summer of 2020, I had a personal reckoning. This fire in my belly that general counsels, CFOs, CEOs, we have to be equity and justice advocates in our roles. DEI is not a program, it's not a one-time donation, it's not philanthropy, it's how we see the world and make business decisions. And the equity movement called me then. Long story short, I'm now at policy, and as you heard from Michael earlier today, we have to really change the nature and logic of governing in our nation. That's what my work focuses on, changing the nature and logic of business in America, especially big business. And so everything everyone has spoken about today really comes down to a very important root cause, and that's corporate America, that's big business in America. And so we are focusing on setting new standards, really redefining what it means to do business in America. It must be centering equity and justice. When we think about DEI, we talk about corporate political activity. Right now, corporate power as it relates to influencing our democracy is 34-1 compared to the public interest. 34-1. So we can talk about the public policies we need every day, but we don't even have that voice all the time. And so the work we're doing is focusing on how we can set new KPIs. That's what business understands, their KPIs, to what Derek was talking about earlier, focused on positive outcomes for all people, especially Black Americans.
So KPIs.
Key performance indicators. So this is how business runs. Every quarter, you have key performance indicators. What are you going to hit as it relates to your products and services? What are you going to hit as it relates to your, culture internally, worker engagement, etc. So we are setting the KPIs. It's our job. We should be setting the rules for business, and we're setting KPIs for the right kind of governance, the ways in which boards should be overseeing corporations, centering equity and justice, all the way through to talent practices and corporate political activity and the like.
What effect this attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, what effect is it having on corporate America? Is it having an effect?
It's having a huge effect, multiple effects though. One thing for sure, it's had a huge chilling effect. And at the same time, corporations that are backing away in the headlines you see, they were never really in this work for real. It was superficial. There are a multitude of corporations and many business leaders that are not backing away, but they're certainly not speaking loudly about their work. So that absolutely needs to change. And we have a great deal of misinformation and disinformation, intentionally, discourse and news about how DEI is under attack that isn't necessarily true. Some of the corporations that are pulling back programs, they were weak programs to begin with, and they're moving in other directions that may be even more meaningful, such as doing pay equity reviews and paying living wages, which is critical to close the racial wealth gap. So I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag, a lot of the chilling effect and fear, but a lot of corporations doing the work in the background, and that's why we need standards for these businesses, and they're really hungry for it. We engage with them every day, and they want the guidance. They keep saying, as the CBC report just released, what does good look like? Just tell us exactly what to do. And I think that's our job now, to tell them exactly what they need to do across the entire enterprise.
Thank you for being so patient as well, because everyone is passionate up here, and we respect that, we like that. Now this could have been an entire panel that what we're gonna talk about next, and that's Black men supporting Trump, right? Or are not committed. We're having this conversation backstage. They don't feel like they are part of the process, right? That their needs are being overlooked, especially economically. So Representative and John, we had a nice conversation that kept getting interrupted because we needed to get out here to do our business. So I want to continue that conversation here. Why is this happening? Some people said it's disturbing, they're concerned by it. You view it as an opportunity. This moment is an opportunity. Take it away.
Thank you, Donna. Look, I'm Congressman Stephen Horsford out of Las Vegas, Nevada. Honored to serve as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. And I really want to thank all of you for participating here at this national town hall. The vice president did her job the other night. And now the question is, are we going to do ours? Because democracy is a team sport, which means that every one of us can do something between now and election day. We have 54 days and a wake up. Because you don't get to wait until election day. We have to do things between today and election day to make the outcome what it needs to be. And then when the election happens, we have to protect the vote, we have to certify the vote, we have to make sure the electoral college process is adhered to, and that's what your member of Congress is responsible for, and why we need Hakeem Jeffries to be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives. And then we have to have an agenda that speaks to the needs, the concerns, the aspirations, the dreams of the people who voted. And those who may not have voted, but still have a stake in our democracy. And so the charge is not just the next 54 days in a wake up, it's what we will continue to do, and that's why this discussion is so important. So I just want to crystallize a few things very quickly. First of all, Black people, we do drive the economy, as you all said, because we drive culture. There's nothing around sports, entertainment, the arts that Black people don't influence and that brands and companies don't use to their profitability. The issue is we have to shift from being a consumer-only focused economy to one that is an ownership-driven, where Black people have a stake in the ownership of the thing that we're helping to build profit for. And at a very time where there are forces who are trying to take away the tools of opportunity, follow me for just a moment. The same people who filed the lawsuits to take away a woman's right to make her own healthcare decisions are the same forces that filed the lawsuit to take away affirmative action. They're the same forces that filed the lawsuit against the Fearless Fund to take away access to capital, even though Black women entrepreneurs have 0.3% of the funding for access to capital. They're the same forces who are putting pressure on corporate America to walk away from diversity, equity, and inclusion, even though we know it's a business imperative. These are the same forces. So why are they so focused on taking away tools of opportunity? Because they understand that the future markets are driven by us. And when they attack DE&I, they are attacking you and I. All of us, not just Black people, Latinos and Asians, LGBTQ+ community, but guess what? We are not going back. We are the future of this country. We will continue to grow, and we are the markets. And so those companies who understand that and who embrace it as a business and talent imperative actually have greater profitability according to the McKinsey Institute. Now, I just wanted to talk about what the Congressional Black Caucus has been doing to protect, to defend, to fight against these efforts to take away the tools of opportunity. issued a report called What Good Looks Like, a corporate accountability report on diversity, equity, and inclusion. You can go to cbc.house.gov. The blue report is up there. We sent letters to Fortune 500 companies. We had more than 200 respond, and of the responses, overwhelmingly, companies are committed to this. And we did outline for them 12 key performance indicators that they need to measure themselves on, and that we as public officials will hold them accountable to. And so this now will become a benchmark for an annual assessment of corporate America. And so I invite corporate America to get on board of this process, to show your commitment to the markets that grow your company. But beyond being defensive and protective, we also have to get on the offense. And so the Congressional Black Caucus, working alongside groups like the Black Economic Alliance Foundation, the Urban League, NAACP, the Black Chamber, and others, we have introduced a plan, a legislative agenda around Black wealth and economic prosperity. That plan, that agenda has been co-sponsored by 100% of the CBC members, 60 members in the House and the Senate. It is focused and based in ownership, addressing rental and housing affordability. We can't only jump to 3 million homes if we don't address the issues of credit, or we don't make housing and rents affordable for people right now. We also are talking about entrepreneurship. That means protecting access to capital, but it also means making sure that the access to procurement and to contracts in both the private and the public sector are wide open for us. Because we're the ones that passed the legislation on the infrastructure bill, on the CHIPS bill, on tax credits for renewable energy, on the investments in technology, which means we have to have a stake in the ownership of those opportunities. And finally, it also means making sure that our young people are educated, are trained, are prepared for really the 21st century economy that is going to be disrupted because of AI. And we have a whole policy series that's been led by Congresswoman Yvette Clarke on what we want to see as the Congressional Black Caucus in any legislation dealing with AI. And one of the main requirements that we will have is that it must protect civil rights and protection of people of color and bias in both the design, the algorithms, and the deployment of any AI technology. So those are just a few of the things that the Congressional Black Caucus is doing. But I just want to close by saying we can't do this without you. You all are the people that we serve. And so when you go back home, definitely connect with your CBC member, but also connect with your member of Congress, whether they're in the CBC or not. Ask what they're doing to join our efforts. The CBC is leading, but we need a whole lot more allies to stand with us in this work. Wow, that was so TV time. That was perfect because the clock is right at 0 right now. We're a little bit over, but I just want you to weigh in if you can,
Representative, on you're saying there's an opportunity. You don't look at it as a concern, it's an opportunity. Can you just speak quickly about that?
So the Vice President talks about an opportunity economy that lifts all of us up. And I did really like when Dr. McAfee talked about all of us means that we have to reshape the systems that have inherently excluded us in order for the all to work. So the Vice President has given us a very clear objective to have an economy that works for all. So now how do we achieve that? Yes, we need federal legislation. We need Black mayors and county execs and state legislators. We need the private sector. We need nonprofits. We need the philanthropic community. We need all of us to come together to shape what it's going to take to get to an opportunity economy for all. And that means all of us having a stake, all of us having a sense of ownership. It doesn't, when I talk about wealth, I don't actually mean wealth like the billionaire's wealth. Trump's wealth is fake to begin with. I'm talking about the single mom in my district who wants to have a stake in having a piece of home that she can then build equity in for herself to maybe start her business, because she needs that access to capital. And then to maybe pass that on to her child so that they don't have to start over. That's what we're talking about when we're centering work, wages, and wealth, and an opportunity economy that works for everybody.
John, it may be, big, but it's aspirational to some folks, right?
Yes, so every week I get 1.5 million views on social media. These are young black men, the majority are young black men, 18 to 35, trying to figure out how this system works. They're looking for a mentor, they're looking for a role model, they're looking for a business plan with their life. Basically, what they're saying, give me the James Brown version of affirmative action. Open the door, I'll get it my business. They want a business plan, they want hope with the business plan. They want not just PhD, but PhD too. They want something practical. That's what we're talking about backstage. The legislation pieces, I can't do that. We need you to do that, the framework. But these folks want, once you create the groundswell and the waterway, they want to put the ships on the bay and they want to sell it. When we were coming up, we all know the majority of households were women in our community. It was in my neighborhood, in my household. These young men now want to come back as the leaders of their households. They want to do it with dignity and respect by not just cashing a check, but writing it. So at one MBB, 1 million Black Business Initiative, we created 450,000 Black businesses since George Floyd's murder. That's 4% of all Black businesses in America. The majority is young Black men. We're being stopped in airports by young Black men. I've been stopped in airports, the TSA agents, they're saying, young man, 7'10". Young man, 6'7". It's a criticism. This is a reason for hope. They're crying out. I just need a plan to go do for myself. And that is something that we can end on in a very positive way. And Don, if you don't mind, I'd like to give that statistic I gave you backstage. Okay. Here's why you should back this man and believe what we say it is. In 1950, America was 90% white. Please let that sink in. That means with Dr. King and Dr. Dorothy Height, and all these heroes and sheroes, Andrew Young did, was basically a moral thing. The nation did a moral thing. We're 10% of the population. Today, the first time in American history, we have a majority of people over 65. Read white, wealthy, baby boomers trying to retire. All I want to go, they want to go play golf and whatever at the same time. These are the wealth creators. They're leaving the stage. Please listen to me. At the same time. It's never happened. Today is 40% Black and brown. Today. Within 10 years, we'll be a majority of minorities. Why did I say financial literacy is a civil rights issue of this generation? This group has never been taught how money, wealth, economics, free enterprise, and capitalism works. That's why I said Black capitalist man. My rich friends need my poor friends to do better if only to stay rich. I just gave you something good. It went right over your head. This has never happened in the history of America. Literally. You've never had a superpower that wasn't the economic power in the history of the world. It's never happened. But now, Doug, for the first time in history, it's not moral, it's money. They actually need us to be successful. The country cannot continue to lead in the world unless Black and brown people and women come up from nothing at scale.
We're 5 minutes over. Okay.
To build on that, housing is accounting for 20% of our economy. And I just have to share this point. 7 out of 10 future households are going to be people of color. So in order for the housing system to be healthy, in order for the economy to be healthy, we're going to have access. So we need to utilize special purpose credit programs that we talked about, and first generation down payment assistance. And it needs to be upfront down payment assistance. And it needs to be so because we can't go to the bank of mom and dad because we've been excluded from opportunity. So first generation allows us to circumvent those processes and give people fair opportunity that ultimately the health of the entire economy depends on. And my final point, there are trillions of dollars going into our economy. We've heard about it. There is a rule, it's a housing rule, because housing really is so critical to all of this. And it's HUD's affirmatively further your housing rule. It's actually the Fair Housing Act affirmatively further your housing rule. And this rule says that for every dollar for housing and community development that goes into our communities, it must be distributed in a fair and equitable way. Because housing, where you live, absolutely matters. So AFFH does not only apply to our housing policies, it applies to the Department of Transportation policies. It applies to the EPA greenhouse gas fund grants. It applies to all of those big things that the Department of Education is doing. We have the tools, and that's why I wanna close here. We have the tools to create the kind of equitable future where all of us can thrive. The question is, will we have the courage to do the things that lift all of us? Because one of the things that I personally made a promise to my grandmother, and I never talk about my family, but we lost my grandmother during the COVID crisis. And I made a promise, our community, because where you live absolutely matters. We die at disproportionate rates because of our neighborhood. So housing during this time helped grow the Black-white wealth gap by $20 trillion. And we don't have enough time to get into it. But the point here is we have to use the very same sensible policies that built the white middle class and do it to create an inclusive middle class. Race-conscious policies created and cemented today's inequities, and only race-conscious policies are going to provide us a path forward that's going to lift our communities up, but also bring everyone with us. Because it's never been our tradition to only help ourselves. Brown versus the Board of Education lifted education for everyone else.
I'll close before they get us out of here. I'll close with a few things. And Cameron Hirschman said this, and I think it's worth repeating. We have to shift from being consumers to owners. Shift our mindsets from being consumers to owners. Second, when we are acting as consumers and we're spending money, who are we spending money with? Which businesses are we supporting? Who are we giving money to? Where are we going on vacation? Think about that with respect to not only investing in yourself, but investing in your community. Third, we are winning. And because we're winning, the attacks will continue. This woman over here, Arian Simone, runs the Fearless Fund and was sued because she was providing support resources to other women of color. And they argued that by providing that support, it violated federal law. That attack was not against her. It was against all of us. And so when we think about the future, yes, we are winning, but when she's attacked, we have to make sure that we are all supporting her. And that we just settled the lawsuit. The Fearless Fund is open for business. She has a grant program. All of you need to go to her website and understand that this company was created to close the wealth gap. $288 billion in the venture capital space. Every single year it goes out. Less than 1% goes to Black people. That's what she's trying to fix. And if you don't know that, learn about it. Support it. Because as we win, more of us will get attacked. And for me, the closing message is, we can't win alone. All of us have to be at that table. All of us have to be rowing in the same direction. Whether we be talking about financial literacy, investments, or anything else. The wealth gap will close because people fight to close it. With legislation being introduced by the CBC, with the reports that the CBC is being issuing to hold corporations accountable. But all of us have a role. All of us have a role in this process. And I would say that if we hold true to that role, we will indeed win and get to that place that we call liberation.
Wow. This is one of the most informative panels that I've ever moderated. Thank you. This is amazing. I could talk about this all day. Our power is what? It's economic power, and we have it, and we need to exercise it, right? Thank you, Alfonso David, Arian Simone, Nikitra Bailey, John Hope Bryant, Representative Horsford, and also Mahalet Gatochi. Close enough. Thank you all. I really appreciate you joining. So thanks again for our tremendous panels and their perspective on their tireless activism. And thank you all for your attention as you're going to take these insights and put them into effect in your own work and struggles. Thank you. Appreciate it.